The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the webinar. Can you all hear me? Okay, if anyone can't hear me, I'd ask you to send a message through, but you won't hear this, so you won't send it. Okay, I'm going to start now. Those that are here. As you can see, the title is Preparing Your Practice for Sale, Summer 2013. When I prepared these slides, I was expecting that we would have a summer, so I'm sorry about the description perhaps being inaccurate, but sunshine is out today, though it's a bit damp. Okay, so let's get things moving. The assumption is at this point that you have already decided to sell your practice somewhere along the line. You've given it some thought. You know, you're perhaps planning for 2-3 years down the line, or some of you may be planning for something a bit earlier than that. Like selling anything, it's important to ensure that the presentation is acceptable to a potential buyer. And that's what we're going to discuss this afternoon. And if you've got any questions along the way, please do not hesitate to type them in, and either myself or one of my colleagues will endeavour to answer you during the webinar, if not immediately thereafter. Okay, so there are a few crunch questions. Again, it's like selling anything. Is your practice attractive to a buyer? And could you do more to maximize its value? Unfortunately, for many small practitioners, looking at the practice through their own eyes, it gives a view of rose-tinted spectacles. People are naturally blind to their own deficiencies, so it might be worthwhile to engage a professional, someone like ourselves, or a friend or a colleague. Perhaps ask some clients, you know, how do you find our practice? What's the service like? I suspect that most of you out there have never sent a survey to your clients. So this is something you need to start looking at, is how attractive is the practice. I think it's worthwhile mentioning at this point that the demand for practices outstrips the supply by a country mile, to put it mildly. However, that does not mean that a practice in a poor condition, in a poor state, will sell. The buyers are discerning and they know what they're looking for. So, could you do more to maximize the value of your practice? Almost certainly yes. There are very few practices who are really, I'd say 100% pucker and on the ball and ready just to roll. There's always something you can do. Again, it's something which you might recognize yourself. You might know needs to be done, and you might decide, you know, you need to go on some sort of program to, you know, grow the practice a bit more, tidy it up. Or it could be something as simple as just making sure that you know, it's a neat and tidy practice. So when a potential buyer walks in, he's not greeted by wilted plants and fading wallpaper, something you might be used to yourself and your clients might be used to, but certainly won't do any favours to a buyer. Like most things in life, timing is everything. So you've got to look at when you want it to happen. You know, you might be thinking a couple of years' time, you've got a lot of time on your side, that's great. You might have an immovable deadline. You may have sold your house, you might be moving somewhere else, you may be married to somebody who's got a new job somewhere, and you're moving city and you don't want to be commuting 150 miles, and you need to get the practice going, because if you're under pressure, I can guarantee you that you will be what is known as a motivated seller, and the price you're going to get, the multiple, is almost certainly going to be lower than what you could have if you had time on your side. There is a lead time to get into shape, as you'll appreciate. Not everything happens overnight. You know, it depends how much is going to be achievable in the time you've got. And as well, you've got to look at, within the context of this, is how long the sale process will take. We have done sales, over a weekend. We've done sales over 6 months. Some people are in a rush. Some people have got no choice. Some people are happy for a lower multiple. They've had enough. They might be on the verge of a nervous breakdown, and they just want to get out. Others are happy to let it drag on. They want to get the measure of the buyer. And the buyer is usually quite happy because they want to get the measure of the seller. And you've got to look at the post sales commitments. Got a question coming in here from Oscar in Llandudno. Good afternoon, Oscar. You're asking, how long before I sell should I be thinking about taking these measures? Well, as I've just mentioned, Oscar, the question is how much needs to be done. If you've got a mountain to climb and there's lots of things to do, you could be looking at 12 months or longer. For most practices, I think it's a case of 3 or 6 months. Usually you'll find that it's a matter of just making sure the files are up to date and not sloppy, and particularly your own books, which you're going to come on to shortly. Okay. Again, this is the time frames that you can see on the screen now is when do you want to sell. These are typically how we would break it down. Other firms like ourselves may have different ways of doing it. We look at the less than a year, within the year, over a year, and now. The now is unusual, and if it has to happen now, well, your practice, it's worth what it's worth. Less than a year is pretty common. More than a year is less common. So, everything depends on every individual circumstances. We ran a webinar a few months ago at the beginning of the year, and one chap came to us and says, I want out by Christmas. That's it. I've had enough. I'm not doing another January. And I'm sure some of you now are smiling to yourselves and you're thinking, this guy was clever. So, yeah, depends what you want. Do you want another January? If you don't want another January, you better start thinking about it now. Okay, here is the $64,000 question. Have you anything to declare? When we act for a seller, we send out a questionnaire. The reason we do that is first of all, we want to make sure that we understand your practice, and we want to make sure we're not dealing with what we call the tire kickers, someone who's not really serious about selling. And anyone who's not going to spend 5, 10, possibly even 15 minutes to fill out the 3 or 4 pages to explain all about their practice and let us know warts and all what their practice is like. It shows they're not really serious, because sure as eggs is eggs, if you've swept something under the carpet, it is going to come back to bite you. If you're open, that will work to your advantage. It always does in every situation. And again, you will face litigation if you have misrepresented the practice. You may have a disciplinary matter outstanding. You're going to have to be open about it. Again, it's something which can be addressed in the contract. If the disciplinary matter is something which is going to have adverse publicity, for example, or is going to lead to a stampede of clients through the door, these are issues which can be looked at. But of course, past litigation, there's no point in hiding it, because we live in the 21st century. It is 2013, and it is so easy to find things out. And if the buyer finds out you've not been honest, it's not going to be a pretty scene. But if you look at number 4, arrow number 4, this is an ideal opportunity for you to analyze your practice. Again, many of you will be doing this perhaps on an annual basis. Some of you will never do it. And then again, if your income's staying the same or perhaps gone up a wee bit, you might be very happy with that, and you think, well, there's no need to do any kind of analysis of the business. Unfortunately, too many accountants are a case of cobbler's children going barefoot. They're giving the advice to the clients what they've got to do and how they've got to look at everything, but they're not doing it themselves. Typically, you could do a SWOT analysis, our old friend, the strength, weakness, opportunity and threat analysis, which is you can never go wrong with. You can look at a gap analysis, which typically looks at where your practice is, where you think your practice is, and where other practices are. Talk to people, golf club, social events, wherever you might be, find out what other practices are doing. And I've lost count of the number of occasions when people would come to me and they say, Norman, can you just explain what exactly my accountant should be giving me for my money? I don't understand it. The guy in the office on top of mine, he tells me he gets this from his accountant, gets that from his accountant. You know, why do I not get these sort of things? The question is, how many of your clients have been speaking to me? So this is a great opportunity. There are other yardsticks, of course. You could use things like client turnover. How many clients have left you this year? How many recommendations came in? And my old favourite, of course, not to the exclusion of the others, bring an outsider in, bring someone in who you can trust, who knows about these things, whether you're paying for the professional advice, whether you want a friend to come in, a family member, get someone to tell you what's right and what's wrong. Okay, we have a number of factors to consider. What kind of practice have you got? Specialities. You might be a practice which only deals with clients who are underwater basket weavers. Not many of them around, and probably not many accountants who feel they could take advantage of such a practice. But there's a buyer for everything. So you've got to look at what do you specialize in, and remember it could take a long time for certain specialities. Your fee structure. When did you last look at how you're charging? Are you undercharging? Are you overcharging? What's the basis? Are you taking a percentage of the client's profits? A percentage of how much tax you save them if you do tax planning? Is there a certain time recovery you've got to get, a margin of some sort of your costings, of your staff, for your own time, and how transparent is your charging? Because remember, if you're charging one way and another firm of accountants is charging in a totally different way and on a different basis altogether, that could either put things off, or it could present a tremendous opportunity for somebody who thinks that you're undercharging, and he'll be happy to grab your practice off you with open arms. Okay, question just coming in. Adrian from Windsor. Good afternoon, Adrian. Wants to know whether being a specialist is a good thing or a bad thing. Well, I don't know any poor specialists in any field, whether it's accountancy, the law, or the medical profession. If you're a specialist, it means you're probably making very good money, and it means you will be attractive to somebody there who's got a similar kind of speciality. If you're the only one of your type in the country, you may have a problem. However, there's nothing we can't solve here at FD Kensington. We don't see problems, we only see opportunities. Now, the next thing to look at is the client spread. What sort of industries do you have? Are they limited companies? Are they sole traders? There was a time when accountants would only deal with sole traders and not limited companies, and vice versa. The best kind of practice, of course, is someone who's got a bit of everything, a good all-rounder, what they call the GP. That would be an easy practice to sell. There are some practices out there make a lot of money on tax returns. They've got perhaps a couple of hundred clients. All they do is the tax returns, and perhaps 3/4 of these clients are straightforward bank income, bank interest, a few dividends, a pension, and it's perhaps half an hour of work to do the return, another hour meeting the clients and letters, so perhaps 1.5 to 2 hours work a year, and they're charging £300-400 for this. So again, there's always opportunities there. Number 4 is an interesting one, is the client base. Many companies, many firms of accountants have grown with their clients. So you might be sitting there just now listening to this, you might be approaching retirement age, you might be at retirement age, already past retirement age perhaps. I'm not saying you passed your best, but perhaps past the age when most people wish to retire. And your clients have been with you for perhaps 30 years, 40 years even longer. And many of them are beginning to retire. So the question is, when they retire and they sell their business, if they sell it at all, what's going to happen to this client base? Are they going to stay with you, or will the children who are taking over the business, or the buyer of their business, will they want a new accountant? These are all very important things to consider. There's cultural issues as well in terms of client base. You might run a practice which is very formal. Everything's very formal in your practice. You're cultivating a certain image. You may well be charging for this. And therefore your client base has got to kind of fit in. Usually it'll be more professionals perhaps. Would your practice appeal to new media types who are more used to coming in a pair of jeans and a string vest, but might be worth a lot of money, and they want to meet a guy who's wearing a pair of trainers and shorts in Starbucks rather than actually at the accountant's office? And ethnicity. This can be a hot potato, and in today's politically correct, sanitized society, there are issues there which people are reluctant to deal with, but they have to be dealt with. If you deal with Chinese restaurants, you might have a Chinese background yourself. You speak the native language to these people, and it's no good selling to somebody who doesn't understand the culture of the clients. Different cultural and religious backgrounds as well, different ways of thinking, different ways of timekeeping, for example. You might be very punctual, but you're looking at a practice with a client base as, shall we say, more Mediterranean and Middle Eastern based, where timing means nothing. So these are important issues, and of course these are issues which we try to sort out at the early stages. These issues, as I say, we try to sort these issues out ourselves at the early stages, because we make the buyer fill in a form as well. So it's not just the seller, but the buyer as well has to show that they're serious, and we try and get a perfect match. We don't always manage it, but we try our best. How efficient is your practice? Do you sweat your assets? Assets, you say? Not much machinery in my practice. The assets are your staff. How much time are they spending surfing the internet? How much time are they wasting? How much time is being recharged? And where do you fit in? How often are you actually there to watch them? How do you spend your time? Do you spend your time going out there meeting people to bring in new clients? Or do you spend your time filling in forms which perhaps another member of staff could do, and you could use your time more efficiently? So look at how efficient you are. You might be attractive for someone who is uber efficient, who sees your practice as being inefficient. Okay, and we've mentioned before, is the cobbler going barefoot? Are your accounts up to date? Because that's one of the first things which is going to be asked by a potential buyer who wants to look at your books. The due diligence is quite simple. They'll look at things like your tax returns, your VAT returns. Does it match the money coming into the bank? If not, why not? And I've got a question here from Paula in Shrewsbury. Paula, you want to know whether you can sell your staff with your practice. Well, Paula, I don't know how you run your practice, but the staff are not slaves, and you can't actually sell staff. But I think I know where you're coming from. There are legal issues here. The transfer of undertakings, protection of employment, TUPE regulations, which is something for a solicitor to get involved in. We don't actually do that. It is a minefield. Again, we can get you all the expert advice you need from employment experts who we work with. But the question is, does the buyer want your staff? Not can you sell the staff, as you put it. The buyer might look at your practice and say, they're down the road, good fit. I've got 3 members of staff who are really underworked. I don't want to make a redundancy. I'll buy this practice and I'll absorb it. Straightforward. So the question of staff, it depends again on the circumstances. Each deal is different. Some people will want your staff and others won't want your staff. Debts, money owing. Do your clients actually settle their bills? Do you ask them to settle
the bills? Do you pay your bills? I know of an accountant who used to walk around with red letters in his pocket because he didn't pay his bills. It was a kind of game of chicken until one Friday afternoon the bailiffs turned up at his house to repossess it, much to the annoyance, shall I say, shock and surprise of his wife. So, you know, make sure again your book. This is part of your books being in order, and again, it's part of the attitude that you take to running your firm. Hardware and software. Is your practice in the 21st century? Are your computers up to date? Do you have any software? Accounts preparation software, payroll software, integrated software, vector software for running company administration, all things like that. Again, if you're an old-fashioned practice, admit it. The question is whether it's worth doing the work to modernize, then sell, or whether just to, you know, admit what you are. Again, that's a question which you have to ask yourself. Back to staff hierarchy, and the mix of staff we've got. This can be a tricky area because, as I say, staff will pick up what's going on. You've got to look who are your key staff, what are their qualifications. Again, which ones will the buyer want? Perhaps the staff want to buy your practice. And in the realm of office politics, which staff members do you tell that you're going to sell and which do you not? And the ones that you don't tell, what will you say when they find out before you tell them? Again, tricky areas here, something we can advise you on. We've got a lot of experience, but that is actually a very important area, how you handle the staff. And of course, as it says on the screen, are you overstaffed or are you understaffed? These are things which are quite important. If you're overstaffed, what are you going to do about it? All right. The next is overheads. This is an area which can be attractive. Is there a building involved? What's the leases? Will someone take your lease over? Can someone take advantage of this? And what about non-fee earners? In some ways, they're surplus to requirement usually, because someone who's buying a practice, who's got a practice already, will have someone who's doing the secretarial and the billing. But then again, someone who's a first-time buyer, they may require all your staff, all the way through from the people who clean the office. Okay, what about your standard of work? This speaks volumes about your staff and your oversight. A buyer may well want to open a file at random and ought to have perhaps a cold review and get a feel for how your staff have been working. Again, it's all part of the due diligence which is going to take place, and it's things you have to be prepared for. And work in progress. How much work in progress do you have? How up to date are you with these sort of things? I've just missed the page. Here we are. Yep. Work in progress. Is there too much there? Again, it boils down again partly to your own bookkeeping and your accounts. Okay, so how do you work with a broker when we're moving forward here to get you to the sales stage? The first thing obviously is to register with the broker. Hopefully you register with us. The broker should undertake a comprehensive review of the practice with you through the various registration processes and discuss issues with you which need attended to. Obviously, you have to bring your books and accounts up to date, including a part year, because a buyer might well say, well, can I see the management accounts? And it's all part of presenting a complete story to the buyers. And of course, you've got to be available for the broker, and the broker will be available for you as well during the negotiations. The broker is part of these negotiations, and he will need to get hold of you sometimes at short notice late at night, because the buyers phone them up and says, Mr. Broker, I'm a wee bit worried about this, that or the other. The broker will say, no problem, Mr. Buyer, let me speak to Mr. Seller. So it's part of a three-way thing, this. And finally, remember, if a problem arises which looks like, it's going to break the deal, don't panic, okay? We can either solve it, and if it does break the deal, you'll know that when the next one comes along, things are going to be ship-shape because you'll know what to look out for. But fortunately, this is very, very rare that when we're involved, that it doesn't go all the way to completion. Darren from Coventry is asking, what could your company do to maximise the value of my practice? Darren, a very, very good question. We also have a division which does practice growth. There's all sorts of things we can do to get, to help maximise the value of your practice. It could be something simple from a 10-minute chat on the phone to make you realise something basic, but give us a call later, Darren, and we'll look into your practice for you. And there's our number if you want to go to the website or phone us for consultation. And that, everybody, ends the webinar. Thank you very much for listening. If there's any questions, you can pitch them online now. You can email us or you can phone in. We have actually recorded this session, so we can send you out recordings if you want. Thank you very much. I'll keep the microphone on and the webinar live for another minute to give time for questions. Okay, everybody, you've got about 30 seconds left if you want to get a question in, whether it's a private or public question. Or again, as I say, you can phone me. Once again, thank you very much for listening, and we'll be in touch. Have a very good evening.